I wish we were doing this back in 1984 when I was 24 years old and just beginning my career, because back then I knew everything. Somehow since then I seem to have forgotten it all. And I do really see this as a very selfish way to help me preserve what's left, or at the very least jog my memory so that I can maybe remember why I once loved writing movies so much. The movies from early 60s into the mid 70s were the movies that changed my life. Dog Day Afternoon made me want to write scripts, hand down. It was probably a combination of Harold and Maude and Dog Day Afternoon, those two movies.
Freeze! Nobody move! Get over there!
I felt the audience involved in a way that I'd just never seen. They were so into the movie. They were so involved with the characters in the movie. They weren't just watching it. They were really invested in everybody.
He moves, take his head off. Put the gun on him. Get out of the center.
Sonny? I can't do it, Sonny.
What?
I'm not gonna make it, Sonny.
They were emotionally involved. I don't even know how to describe it. I just felt different.
Let him act!
I was, 13 or 14 when I saw those movies, and completely changed everything for me.
Let him act!
I'm sorry, Sonny.
Oh, shit.
To me, this is the perfect opening scene to a perfect movie, written during the 13-year time span when most or all of my favorite movies were written, 1962 to about 1975. Most important of all, this was the movie that made me want to write movies. I was 14 years old the year it came out. It was R-rated, which meant that I had to have my mom buy me a ticket, and then I had to sneak into the theater to watch it. Most importantly, for our purposes, this is one of the ballsiest scripts ever written. It's a movie that starts out as a movie about a couple of hapless bank robbers and evolves into a movie that becomes about, among other things, how love drives us all insane. There is no score, no music at all beyond the Elton John song over the opening credits. It's all about the words. And in 5 minutes, you fall in love with these words and with every one you see. The beginning of a movie automatically excites me. I don't watch a movie for the first time if I've missed the opening. And unless you're at a Hollywood premiere, the opening scene is the only part of the movie you watch full of nothing but good faith. I have no idea how to write them. They take me forever, and I can't move forward until I've written my opening scene. I spend more time on the opening than any scene in the script by far. I'll take notes, I'll do research, do anything other than actually start writing, because I need to know exactly what it is I'm going to be fading in on. I can't begin until I know that. What is that first line of dialogue? Is it over black? I do that a lot. I have someone say something and then fade in. I don't know why, I just started doing that, and it's a way to trick myself that I've done something good.
It's cold outside. The guy on the radio said it's gonna get down to 34. It's 34. That's freezing, for Christ's sakes. Yo, Chili, were you spacing?
They're closing down the Granville. You know that theater down on Biscayne?
Yeah, the guy owes Momo a couple G's.
I know. I was thinking maybe Momo should buy it. I could run it for him, show some old Cagney movies.
Hey, what's Momo gonna want with some broken down theater that shows movies no one wants to see anymore? Outside of maybe turning it into some kind of porno house, not gonna give much of a
I'm gonna go talk to Miss Chili.
Besides, you already got a job.
Yeah.
Hey, Ray, how you doing?
Yeah, good, you?
Okay. Hey, can you believe this weather? Miami Beach, for Christ's sakes.
Chili Palmer. It's chilly outside, and it's chilly inside. It's a regular chili fest.
How you doing, Ray?
And, well, obviously much better than you, Chili.
It was a good one.
Yeah.
The first time I adapted a novel, it was on Get Shorty. I learned very quickly that if you take a book you love and just try and put it through the movie machine, just try and turn it into a movie, it becomes a very trivialized version of the book. You end up with something that doesn't
work either as a book or as a movie. It's just sort of its own silly thing.
Because you haven't made choices, you haven't made hard choices. And the only way I can make choices is to really write it for myself. What is it about for me? Sometimes it's something thematic, you know. You latch on to this thematic idea, and then you cull everything that doesn't speak to it when you're adapting. There are all sorts of ways. But the real trick is really making it mean something to yourself as opposed to simply refashioning it as a movie.
Are you sure it was Ray Bones that took the coat?
That's what the man said.
Hey, tomorrow I see on the TV weather it's gonna be nice and warm. You don't need the coat.
This is it.
Hey, Chili, get the coat. Just don't piss the guy off, okay? And we're gonna have to call Momo and straighten the whole thing out. And Momo's gonna be pissed off for wasting his time, but we don't need that, huh?
Don't worry, man. I'm not gonna say any more than I have to, if that.
Once upon a time, back when I knew everything, I would have generously called myself a writer's writer. But now, in reality, I know that I'm really just a very lucky guy who happened to accept a lot of writing jobs. And this is something we should probably talk about, why we write what we write. How is it that frequently the things we think are going to be meaningful, that are going to win awards and become significant in the cinematic pantheon, turn out so shitty? Meanwhile, the things we do just because they were handy or we simply needed the money turn out to be the thing that changes our lives. I wrote Out of Sight because I had 3 kids living in the same bedroom and I needed a bigger house. And that was the job that was dangled in front of me. I had no aspiration beyond the desire to have my own bathroom.
I never thought about that when I was young. I never thought about how do you have a family and how do you have a career and how do you keep them both. I mean, that's a challenge. So I think that was a big part of it, and a lot of jobs I took were jobs because I had my family, and this was a job that I could get, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. And some of those turned out to be great experiences. But your decision-making matrix just starts to change as you go along.
Out of Sight remains, for me, my favorite and the single most satisfying experience I've had in 28 years of writing screenplays. I was even nominated for an Oscar. I say this not to ham-handedly drop in the fact that I was nominated for an Oscar. After all, you've had several actual winners up here before. No, I mention it only because why you do something doesn't necessarily matter. How you do it is everything, maybe the only thing. At least I tell myself that.
I'm Gary.
I'm Celeste. It takes forever to get a drink around here. There's only one
bar.
waitress. Oh, don't go.
Those guys bother you?
Oh, they're fine. I mean, you just got here. You help yourself.
You like bourbon?
I love it.
We got that out of the way. Tell me, Celeste, what do you do for a living?
I'm a sales rep, and I came here to call in a customer, but they gave me a hard time because I'm a girl.
Is that how you think of yourself?
As a sales rep?
As a girl?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
I like your hair. I like your outfit.
But actually, this is my second favorite outfit. I had a first favorite, but it got ruined and I had to get rid of it.
You did?
It smelled.
Really? Having it clean didn't help?
No. So tell me, Gary, what do you do for a
How
living?
far do you want to go with this?
Not yet. Don't say anything yet.
I don't think it works for somebody else. You know, Gary and Celeste, what do they know about anything?
And Steven Soderbergh always had a vision for what that scene would look like. And I wrote the scene, instead of it being fractured that way, I wrote the scene where it was happening on the way. It sort of starts in the bar, and then you have these series of scenes as they go down the hall, get on the elevator, walk to the room. I did something different. And Steven said to me, always would say to me, don't worry, I know what I'm going to do with that. I have an idea, I know exactly what I'm going to do with that. And he made it sort of a mini model of the whole movie, because the whole movie is fractured that way.
And you look at each other, and for a few seconds, there's this kind of a recognition. Like you both know something. The next moment, the person's gone. And it's too late to do anything about it.
And then after that, the movie plays straight out. After that sequence, there are no more flashbacks, no more anything. The movie just unfolds. And so that was all Steven Soderbergh and Ann Coates. And in the script, it's very straight ahead, and I don't think that interesting. Also, I have to add the music there. David Holmes' score is amazing. So everything kind of comes together, and much different than I saw it. much, much different than I saw it. And when I saw the dailies from the love scene, I thought, this isn't going to work. This is so tame. I don't think there's nothing here. And then when I saw it cut together, it was amazing to me.
More than any other form of writing, screenwriting, for better or for worse, is collaborative. Invariably, the second draft will be worse than the first draft. Be ready for it. Don't panic, but it will reek. As the saying goes, you try to please everyone, you please no one. What happens is I do this draft, I listen to the person or that person, I rewrite for an actor who doesn't commit, I rewrite for a budget that's made up, I rewrite based on the notes that the studio head scribbled while reading my script in the midst of 11 or 12 others. I have my own problems with the script that I'm trying to fix. The producer gets a last-minute thought. I try that. I try everything. I put it all in there, and it's awful. And then a strange thing happens to me every single time, and has for 28 years. Rather than get depressed, I always, without fail, get angry at myself for being so weak and pathetic, for not having the conversation when we were, having the conversation. And then I start a new file, and I call it My Draft. And everybody's ideas, everybody's thoughts, everybody else's things they want me to try all get pushed aside. They all become like the radio in the next room. I can hear them, I'm aware of them, but they're not distracting me. I wish I could skip the second draft altogether. I wish there was some way to magically go from a first draft to a third draft. I wish I could better defend my work in the room, and I wish I could be smarter.
You should ask my family what I'm like when I'm writing a script or when it's not going well. You're just not present because you're solving this puzzle. There's this Rubik's Cube you're doing in your brain that you're constantly trying to figure out, so it's very hard to be present. And my kids, Dad, 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 they're always doing that to me, even when I'm driving. Dad, did you hear what I just said? And so you're focused because having not solved these problems, it's maddening and you can't let go of it. And by the same token, when things are going well, you're the greatest guy in the world and you're having a good time. And so it's a moody existence. And so it is tough, and it is tough on everybody around you, or it can be.
My father was a pilot and liked to take me flying in his Cessna. And so it was one day at 16 years old when my father had a heart attack and I found myself at the controls of the plane, moments away from crashing into the Santa Cruz Mountains. It was then that I first began to think about writing. Okay, that's not actually true. That never happened, but we're all paying attention to my artfully described digression. My father was, though, in fact, a pilot, and he would take me flying in his Cessna. And once we would reach altitude, he would always ask me the same thing. Scott, if I had a heart attack right now and you had to land right now, where would you land? This is, I suppose, a perfectly reasonable thing to ask a 13-year-old when you're teaching them how to fly. But with a sensitive soul like me, it can be somewhat traumatizing and lead to a life where one is always looking for a safe place to land. And in fact, my career has been defined by what I can only describe as a consistent failure of nerve, fear. Every day of every month, I wrestle with it. But unlike some writers who bravely channel their fear into very personal, original pieces, I tend to back away. So like Sterling Silliphant, I wake up and all of a sudden I'm a cautionary tale. I'm certainly grateful for any success, and I can point to one or two pieces I'm very proud of. And I'm appreciative of how much I've learned on the journey, as it were, because in our everyday life, learning is the process, and the process, as I've said, is everything.
For me, what I really remember, and I remember very clearly, is the process on every movie. And I've had some great ones. That, for me, is the takeaway, because standing in the back of the theater watching the movie, it's very hard to get your head around how you feel. It's kind of fun when you think about it really from the outside, that you're standing in the back of a theater and they're watching your film, but it doesn't give me anything. When I look back on the process and sitting there with certain directors in particular and certain producers, that's great.
Though I've always known that I was on the right train, I worried sometimes that I was on the wrong track. And I thought a lot about this for a long time. And then I turned 50. And all of a sudden I realized that life isn't necessarily supposed to give you everything.
I thought I would start directing sooner. I thought I would write more original screenplays than I have. And I didn't realize I would spend as much time rewriting other people's screenplays as I have.
No matter what I'd done or what I was doing, I'd be wishing I'd done it differently or had done more. And that's a bad place to be, particularly when nothing is especially wrong with my life. 50 is the perfect age, I decided, to stop being so afraid.
I've had a really nice 28 years, you know, and I've worked with very good people, and for the most part, I've had very few what one would describe as bad experiences or frustrating experiences. I've had a pretty good time. Out of Sight was one of maybe the single most satisfying creative experience I ever have. Get Shorty was a great experience for me. Working on Minority Report was one of the greatest, most difficult experiences I've ever had. I loved it.
Minority Report was a very difficult screenplay to write because it was loaded with so much technical detail. But still, I said to myself, I wanted to read like a good story, and that has to be the challenge, because that's how you sell it. That's how you get people involved with it, and actors want to be in it.
The short story is conceptually the same thing, but ultimately we ended up writing a brand new movie. The first thing that Stephen said to me is, write this like it's happening today. If somebody answers a phone, they answer a phone. Don't describe the phone. If they get in a car, they get in a car. For the moment, let's just think about the story, which was a huge relief to me and made it much easier to think about things. And the movie we watched before I started writing was The French Connection. So we were really thinking about it as a kind of gritty police movie.
Let's very briefly just talk about the state of writing in Hollywood, just what's happening now to writers, particularly young writers. Let me explain how it works. Some lower-level development exec who works for the producer right out of Wesleyan, gives the writer notes and sends him off again with the notes, and the writer dutifully executes these notes. And then the young development exec suggests a couple more things based on how one of their other scripts was received recently at the studio, and the writer makes these changes, and then the development exec finally hands the script in to the producer, who hasn't been in a single story meeting since they sold the idea to the studio, but is in lots of meetings at the Producers Guild, where he's on the board and they're busy trying to limit the number of producing credits on movies to only those who actually produce. Anyway, I digress. The producer reads the script and asks, "What is this? This is a whole other movie. We can't turn this into the studio." And the development exec goes back to the writer and says, "The producer hated it and wants it to be more like what we pitched." And the writer says, "But I followed the outline and made all of your changes." And the development exec says, "Yeah, I know, but he wants a new script." And the writer asks timidly, his voice barely above a whisper, if he can possibly be paid for the delivery of the work he's done. And the development exec explains that in order for that to happen, they'd have to turn the script into the studio, and the studio doesn't want to do that now and f up his chances, because the first impression is everything. 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 The writer says, "But I'm broke and I need the money. So can I take another job?" And the development exec says, "No way. We've been waiting 9 weeks for this as is." And the writer says, "Then I have to turn it into the studio so I can get paid." And so now the producer, who's not bothered to talk to the writer or been in any meetings up to this point, calls the writer's agent and says, "Your client's being difficult. If he keeps this up, he's not going to work in this hemisphere ever again. Certainly not for me." And the agent, who is very young and also a bit of a pussy and just wants to keep it all flowing, asks the writer, can't he just do a quick draft of what they want? Because if he doesn't, no one will work with him. And so the writer does the best he can, not really sure what he's doing because he's well and truly on his own. But he does the best he can because his wife is going to have a baby and he doesn't want to be perceived as difficult. So he turns in this new draft, which the producer, after 2 more drafts from the writer, finally signs off on. And they turn it into the mid-level studio exec assigned to the project, who reads it and says she likes a lot of it, but it's not really what they agreed to, and can they have a meeting to go over it? So they bring the writer in for a meeting with the mid-level studio exec, a junior studio exec with a pad, the producer, the development exec who works for the producer, and anyone else who happens to be in the building, and they go over the script. And they tell the writer that they can't turn the script into the head of the studio because they'll know he'll hate it as written. But if the writer makes a few small changes, but key changes, they think it has a good shot. And the writer, who's stunned, calls his agent from the parking lot and says, can't he get paid for delivery now? And the agent says, you got to do this if you want your movie made. And if you get your movie made, you're going to be worth a lot more than what you're owed right now. So consider this an investment in yourself. And so the writer dutifully executes all the notes and turns the script in yet again. And the studio exec hands it upstairs to the head of the studio without reading it, because the lower level studio exec read it and assured her that all was fine, thus covering the mid-level studio exec's ass. And the head of the studio only reads scripts on Sunday between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., reads it and says he loves the idea for the movie, but hates the script, and who's available to replace the writer. I think that's all we need to say about that. What I have to tell myself with those jobs, with rewriting jobs in particular, is, because the muscles are the same as adaptation or writing original, you're just fixing a story, you're telling a story. But the approach for me, the way to stay interested, is I tell myself, this is going to be an exercise. I've never written a kind of movie like this. This is the challenge. I'm going to write a horror movie. I'm going to rewrite a superhero movie or a war movie or what have you. And I'm going to figure out how to bring to bear all the things I say belong in good storytelling, no matter what the concept it is, and see if that's possible to do. 99% of the time what you get sent, you're actually surprised they're making it. You're actually surprised that somebody wants to make it. There's no love in there. Nobody's loved this thing. They've been sort of thrown together. They're a part. And again, we're talking about assignments, not original scripts for the most part, not something that somebody created on their own and worked on. And because those movies usually get written by one person. There's usually only one name associated with really original material. But the stuff that's sort of developed, you see that people have just sort of come and gone and nobody's really taken care of anything or really thought about it. And I recognize how arrogant that sounds, but it's interesting. And why they're making it often has nothing to do with the values we all care about in a story. I've talked a lot and enough, I think, so I'm not quite sure how to stop. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the very last and very short scene from Out of Sight. It's my favorite scene in the movie, and for a couple of reasons. I'd been stuck on how to end the script for months. And in a moment of desperation, I called up the novelist Elmore Leonard and asked him if he had any ideas. I just couldn't end the movie the way his novel did, where the federal marshal shoots the bank robber she's just slept with and then heads back home to Florida. Elmore told me he liked the way the book ended just fine, but that he'd think about it. But right now, he said he had to hang up the phone because he was about to talk to a guy from Texas who'd broken out of prison over a dozen times. I said, wait, what? Who? And so we talked a little more, and I wrote this scene.
You busted out.
I prefer to think of it as an exodus from an undesirable place.
How long before they caught up with you?
That time?
There were others?
Yeah. That was the 9th.
The 9th?
Well, 10 if you count that prison hospital in Ohio I walked away from.
You want to walk in, Henry?
Hajira.
Hajira? Now we're off to Glades.
Yeah, it looks that way. I was supposed to leave last night with the lady marshal, but for some reason she wanted to wait.
She did, huh?
Guess it's cheaper taking 2 of us down in one van.
Could be. Maybe she thought we had a lot to talk about.
Really? Like what?
I don't know. Long ride to Florida.